Here we go. Welcome into College Football Now. Harrison Graham, Joey Peterson with you as the College Football Playoff Committee is set to unveil their latest rankings and bracket as we are just a couple of weeks away from finding out who makes the first 12-team college football playoff. Joey, it's rivalry week, then it's championship Saturday next week. And then it's here. We are very, very close to the finish line here.
We are. And, man, it's usually at this point of the year we're saying this is the best time of the year. But that seems especially true after this past weekend we had. The amount of upsets, the amount of it was an absolutely crazy Saturday of college football. Ole Miss losing, Alabama losing. So many questions that need answers. Hopefully we'll get some tonight.
Yeah, I think anybody, as you guys, if you want to shout out your favorite team, we'll get some shout-outs. Anybody that said this playoff was going to water down the regular season, I got to push back pretty strongly because that A&M Auburn 4 overtime game is completely irrelevant in prior years. Now, sure, it's not irrelevant if you're an A&M or an Auburn fan, but like if you're me and you're just intrigued on who's going to make the playoff, I mean, I'm on the edge of my seat watching the end of that game. So I think it's awesome. I think it's a great year for the 12-team playoff to launch because there's not really a dominant team, and it's going to be interesting to see it all play out and see what the matchups are. We got Carol saying, go Dogs and Sikkim. Is that Georgia and Baylor there? That's an interesting combination.
I think Sickim's a Georgia thing they say there.
Really?
Yeah, at the kickoff, they get go Dogs, Sikkim.
So are they copying Baylor or vice versa? Because you don't want to be copying Baylor. No offense to any Baylor alums in the chat. That's a tough look. Ty Man rocking with the Buckeyes. Be less wrong, Notre Dame. Joey's got a hot take on the Fighting Irish. Some might say
not a hot take, just something I think needs to be discussed.
Okay, we'll get to it. Go Gators. I'll tell you what, if Florida did not have some untimely injuries, they could be like a pretty dangerous fringe playoff team right now with the way DJ Lagway's playing. I think next year they're going to be like the trendy playoff pick.
No, I agree.
With Lagway. Totally. He's pretty fun to watch. Who else we got here? Go Clemson. Please top 12. Don't need to be in playoff bracket yet, but hoping top 12. Yeah, and speaking of which, I know this is all still new for everybody, and maybe this is your first time really locking in here. Just a reminder of what the new college football playoff format looks like. 12 teams, obviously. The 4 highest-ranked conference champions get the top 4 seeds, which will then earn a top 4 bye. Seeds 5 through 8 will get home games in the round of 16 in that opening round. One group of 6 team gets a guaranteed spot. And then something else I should mention as well. The 5th highest ranked conference champion also gets an automatic berth, just not necessarily a first round bye, obviously.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Big 12 shapes up or the ACC shapes up, if there's some extra losses in there, if maybe a one-loss Boise State gets that first-round bye over the winner of the Big 12.
Yeah, last week that the committee had it that way. They had Boise State as the 4 seed, higher ranked than BYU, who then lost again to Arizona State. I think Arizona State is a team to watch tonight. How far do they rise up after the way they've been playing over the last several weeks? So that'll be very interesting because they were picked dead last in the preseason poll in the Big 12. America's conference, people, the Big 12. You don't know what's coming on a weekly basis.
Yeah, how many? 9 teams still alive in the Big 12 as of right now?
9 teams still alive to make the Big 12 championship game. The 4 that are most likely in the have real paths are Arizona State, Iowa State, Colorado, and who am I blanking? BYU. Those are the 4 that have real paths, but technically Kansas State, Texas Tech, TCU, West Virginia, and Baylor are still alive to get to Arlington if chaos happens. So, listen, it's been a chaotic couple of weeks, so I wouldn't rule anything out at this point in time. Who do you think, Joey, is the best team in college football? And you guys in the chat as well. If you had to pick right now, best team, who would you roll with? Producer Sam, notable OU alum who's back on his high horse after a win over Alabama, says not Texas. Joey, do you have a strong take here? You might have a team that's not on the screen.
So I don't have the – I think we need to be talking about Notre Dame a little bit higher than we are. If they don't have that loss against Northern Illinois, and I get it, they do have the loss, but if they don't have that loss, they're undefeated right now. They're dominating everybody they're playing. I don't think they're the best team in college football. I think it's Oregon, and then I would probably say Ohio State second. But, man, I just think what Oregon has at quarterback – with Dylan Gabriel, the playmakers they have on offense, and what they do in the trenches and in that front seven. And, of course, it helps being coached by the guy who made it up there in Eugene, Dan Lanning. He's the Dan Campbell, I would say, of college football.
He's getting NFL looks, and Jeremy Fowler said NFL executives compare him to Dan Campbell, so that's pretty interesting. Ty Man says Ohio State. Miami from Bam Bam. Notre Dame from Be Less Wrong. Is that the Tide or all detergent? I'm not sure I get that joke. John is going with Oregon. Ohio State will beat Oregon in the conference championship. Yeah, that'll be interesting if we get that rematch. If Ohio State beats Michigan, we will get the rematch between Ohio State and Oregon. So some big games coming up this week. We'll talk about that as well. It is rivalry week in college football. Do got to tell you first about our sponsor, Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. And Joey, I've been playing fantasy football my whole life, but there's nothing worse than having a bad draft or bad injury luck and your season being down the toilet a few weeks in. Prize Picks, you can set new lineups every day, and you can do different sports as well, and it's absolutely awesome. All you got to do is pick 2 or more players and pick more or less on the stat projections available. Join the 10 million users and counting in North America playing Prize Picks right now. A couple of deals for you. One, prizepicks.com/CLNS, code CLNS. If you get signed up today, use our promo code, you're going to get a $50 bonus once you play for just $5. Doesn't matter if you win or lose. And your first play should include this Tyreek Hill special. Just half a receiving yard. You take the more, obviously, on that. Pair that with something else. If you just do a 2-player entry, you're halfway home to a victory. So take advantage of that deal right now. prizepicks.com/CLNS. You play for $5, you get a $50 bonus. If you're a new customer, check it out today. Football, basketball, baseball when it's in season, hockey, other sports as well. You can cross over sports within your entries. 2 or more players in your lineups. prizepicks.com/CLNS. Code CLNS. Link is in the live chat. All right, Joey, these were the rankings last week. Just to recap, no changes in the top 4 I would expect again, as Oregon was off. Ohio State, Texas, Penn State all took care of business. Penn State had a scare at Minnesota, but they got it done. Indiana, I think they're also a team to watch tonight. How far do they drop? I think they're safe with how much the SEC had a rough week in terms of making the playoff as long as they beat Purdue this week, but do they fall to 7 or 8? Do they fall to 11 or 12? I'm kind of curious to see where they check in the pecking order because they got worked pretty good by the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I think it was definitely their saving grace having Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Bama all lose those games because when you do look at it, it wasn't really a close contest, right?
No.
They had a great opening drive against Ohio State, and then after that, almost absolutely nothing. The Buckeyes dominated that game pretty much from that second drive all the way throughout it. Yeah, there were some special teams mistakes, but the Buckeyes capitalized on it. And so it is going to be interesting to see how far they fall. I'm expecting them somewhere in the 8 or 9 range tonight.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. We'll go through our projected rankings as well. You look at the results from the top 5 there. Oregon finally a week off. I think they played 9 weeks in a row. Ohio State taking care of Indiana. Texas handling Kentucky. And then Penn State. This game kind of got buried because there was so much chaos going on. They survive at Minnesota. I liked Minnesota upset alert there, and they almost pulled it off. But Penn State in a good position. They beat Maryland this week. They don't have anything to worry about. Okay, 6 through 10 here. Notre Dame, they handled Army. They're in a good position at 10-1. Alabama, Joey, I think that's the number one thing I'm watching tonight because they now have 3 losses, and I think the average person would just be like, oh, well, they're done. They're 8-3. They just got worked. They lost a game at Vanderbilt. This is their 3rd loss. This is not Nick Saban's Bama. But they might have gotten enough help from other teams losing that even though it looked that bad and they have 3 losses, they may not be completely dead. So definitely curious to see where the Tide end up tonight. That was a bad showing in Norman.
It was, and I think that's going to be the notch on their resume, is when you look at a couple of the losses they've had. Sure, they had the loss in Neyland Stadium against Tennessee, but they lose on the road against Vanderbilt. And sure, Vanderbilt has been playing better football than what we're used to Vandy playing, but still, that's not a great loss, you would say, right? And then they lose on the road in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is a shell of what we've known them to be. So 2 of their 3 losses are against teams that everybody in the country would say you need to beat that team if you're Alabama.
I think it's how you lose, too. I mean, they got rolled.
Yeah.
Like, that was not a game. That's my thing. It's like, okay, look, in this 12-team system, as years go by, there will be years where 3-loss teams get in. Probably this year. At least one's probably going to get in. But, like, there's just something to me about how you play in some of these games that just wasn't competitive.
Yeah.
I think, like, even Ole Miss, and we're going to do some blind resume, and they don't have a great one outside of the Georgia win. It's not like they got worked at Florida, though. Like, Florida's been playing a lot better. That game comes down to the wire, and they lose by a touchdown. Bama's non-competitive in Norman. Like, I just – something about that rubs me the wrong way, that if Bama kind of gets the notch up out of some of these other 3-loss teams. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. Colorado, they lost last week, Joey. Their path to the playoff is extremely narrow now. They got to win this week, get some help to get to the Big 12 title game. Kind of a bummer, because I think that would have been a pretty cool story to get Deion Shador and Travis Hunter to the college football playoff. Not dead yet, but pretty unlikely. And then again, Arizona State there, Iowa State, very much in the Big 12 mix. The Big 12, I think, is the most fascinating part of this discussion because, A, there's still a small chance they don't make the playoff, the Big 12, which I think they will, but there's a chance they don't. And B, who the hell is going to be the team? Because there's still several still alive at this point.
There are several still alive. There's also several teams I believe could get a win against any team, but every single one of those teams I feel like could also lose against any team they play. I'm curious, you're a TCU guy, a Big 12 guy for sure. Who would you say of the Big 12 has the best chance to make some waves in the playoff?
I still think if somehow Colorado got in, they'd be the most dangerous because I think to win a playoff game, especially if you're undermatched from a roster standpoint, you need a couple of things. One, you need to be well coached. I think they're pretty well coached. Say what you want about Deion. I think you watch them. They're pretty buttoned up this year. Two, you need a big-time quarterback. Shador, say what you want about the guy. He's one of the best in the country. No one's going to dispute that. And they got a Heisman-caliber player in Travis Hunter. So they have the ingredients that if they were to get in, I think they could win a game or two. The problem is they're probably not going to get in now. So after that, I think ASU has played the best recently. They've won 6 or 7 games in a row. So they have this Scatabo kid at running back who's kind of a fun story. Their quarterback Levitt's pretty solid, but I'd probably bet against the Big 12 champ winning a playoff game at this point, depending on matchup, unless it's Colorado, because I just don't think any of these teams really have the ingredients you need if you're going to be a little undermanned at some key spots. So it's unfortunate Colorado lost. You know what's funny? If Kansas played like this all year and people thought they would be this caliber team, I think if they, in a world where they could make the playoff, I think they could win a game or two, but obviously that's well past the realm of possibility at this point.
Do you think it was the loss of Kotelnicki that took them just a little bit of time to get adjusted to that and get going offensively?
And you guys help us out, like the video. Let's get a 50% like rate. Thanks to everybody tuning in. Playoff committee going to release their rankings around 8 o'clock Eastern, so we're talking shop until then. Stay tuned as well. Mac Brown out at North Carolina. We're going to take a look at some potential replacements there. But I think that played a role because if you watch Jalen Daniels now, their quarterback, compared to 6 weeks ago, way more comfortable.
Yes.
Way more confident. They're committing to running the ball more with Devin Neal, who's a really good player. So I think Kansas will look back at the season and say, man, that was kind of a wasted opportunity. But, the Big 12 going to be fascinating. ACC as well. I think the door is open for 2 ACC teams to make the playoffs.
Yeah,
and that did not seem to be the case a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have argued for that to happen a couple weeks ago. But again, a lot of this lies in all the unrest from the SEC this past weekend. But with all those teams losing, I think SMU deserves a shot. Heck, even if they go to the ACC championship game and lose to Miami, or heck, if Miami loses to them, however that conference shakes out, even if Clemson sneaks in there, I think they've got enough people in that conference. I think they've got two that deserve a shot, whether it's Miami and SMU, whether it's Miami and Clemson, whoever it is.
If SMU wins this week and is at least competitive in the ACC title game, I think they're going to get in.
Yeah, and I think
they're probably in. And we'll talk Clemson, South Carolina. The winner of that game, Joey, could get like the last spot. I think that could be a win and get in situation if a couple dominoes fall right. So I don't know when the last time Clemson, South Carolina mattered this much, but it certainly matters now. There's no doubt about that. All right, a little rapid fire here. Some big questions we have coming into tonight. We talked about it a little bit earlier, Joey. How far does Indiana drop? Because Saturday was so crazy. At the end of that game, I was like, they might just be screwed now.
Yeah.
And then 6 hours later, you're like, not only are they not screwed, they're probably fine.
Yes.
I think they'll still be in the top 10 or 11, and if they are, you win next week and you're in the playoff.
I think they're right on the cusp of top 10. I'm glad that they are, because at the end of the day, they've got a great offense, and I would love to see Coach Sig get a chance to win a national title in his first year at Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't view them as a team that would make a ton of noise, but listen, I think if they go 11-1 and based on the help they've gotten, I think they deserve a spot. Arizona State on the other side, how far do they rise? They were 21st last week, beat a top 15 BYU team. Crazy ending, by the way.
Yeah,
for anyone who watched that. Can they get like to 12, 13, 14 tonight? I mean, that's a big jump, but a lot of those teams between 8 and 17 lost. So it's going to be interesting to see how close they are in terms of, threatening for that top 12. Now, if you're ASU, just control what you can control. If you win the Big 12, you're probably making it anyway. But I'm curious to see how much movement there is there.
Yeah, I think there'll be a good amount, because this wasn't their only big win of the season. And, man, shout out to Coach Dillingham. Kenny Dillingham has done a fantastic job with Arizona State, taking them from what they were last year, an absolute dumpster fire, to competing for a chance to win the Big 12, get in the playoff. That turnaround, I mean, it's got to be talked about just as in the same breath as people talk about Indiana.
Preseason picked dead last in the Big 12, and they're potentially a win away from having a chance to win a Big 12 championship. Okay, how do they order the 3-loss SEC teams? Not including Missouri. Sorry, Mizzou fans. I think they're in a different tier. But Bama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Texas A&M. What do they do with those 4 teams? Who's ranked where? I think that's going to be pretty curious, because I think one of those teams will get in. So I think where you're ranked this week matters a lot, because you only have a couple weeks left. So how does the pecking order? I'll give you an example. If Alabama's ahead of Ole Miss, I don't think there's anything Ole Miss can do unless Alabama loses to Auburn, because Ole Miss plays Mississippi State. That's not a resume builder. So if they're the lower ranked team, they need more help, right? Like, they're not going to just change the rankings next week between those two specifically if they both win or they both lose. So, like, I think who's ever ranked out of those two specifically higher is in a much stronger position if they get some help to get into the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see where they have South Carolina. We talked about it a little bit already. But what the Gamecocks have been doing at the end of this stretch, they have to all be looking back to early September when they got screwed out of a game against LSU and be thinking, man, if that passer or roughing the passer isn't called on that interception return for a touchdown, this season's totally different. But they've got a chance to build the resume up even more this last week against Clemson, and that's a great rivalry game. I think they got a chance to get it in.
Yeah, it's going to be a big game for both teams there. Both teams still have playoff aspirations. And then, yes, Notre Dame title talk. I will say this. I do agree that they've just been under the radar, kicking teams' ass now. They haven't had the hardest schedule, but still, they've taken care of business, and a lot of teams haven't. So kudos to them for rallying the troops after that NIU loss, which is just a total embarrassment. But they're playing good ball. I'll say this. They're not super dynamic at receiver, but Jeremiah Love at running back is electric in the open field. So if they can find matchups where they can run the ball and they don't ask Riley Leonard to do too much, then they can win a couple games.
Yeah, and I think that's their biggest Achilles heel is the fact that they have a quarterback who you don't necessarily feel confident in his ability to push it down the field with his arm.
Yeah.
He can run the ball just as well as Love can, right?
Yep.
Maybe not as well, but they've got a dynamic running game. But when it's all said and done, at the end of the game, if you need to run a 2-minute drill, do you feel comfortable with the wide receivers you have? And with Riley Leonard at quarterback, I don't know what Marcus Freeman's answer to that question would be.
They're a team that needs to play with a lead.
Yes.
Like, if they're having to come behind, that they're in big trouble. All right, get a super chat here, then we're going to do a little North Carolina hot board, and then we'll get back into the rankings talk. Rebel, Montana, UNLV, go fight, win, playoff chance. Marsh home. Marsh left the office. UNLV, I think, is the last team out of all the teams still alive, but if they were to beat Boise State in the Mountain West championship game, and if they got help from like a Tulane, if they lost a game, they could still get the group of 6 spot. So, it's been a good year for UNLV. Kind of a crazy year. You had that whole QB,
that feels like forever
I know,
ago.
it feels like 10 years ago, but they've done well. Barry Odom, speaking of Barry Odom, we're going to talk about him in a second. But, that's definitely a team to watch for.
Oh, we got another super chat.
Normal CFP producer Jack Lotteray, who is representing his Arizona State Sun Devils. And joke's on you, Jack. You just sent us the same super chat twice. Thanks for your contributions to Chat Sports here. He says, the future Big 12 champs, the Arizona State Sun Devils. So shout out to Jack. Producer Sam is refusing to put your super. I'm kidding. He's trying to load the software. There we go. There it is. Forks up, baby. Jack's spending some time with family the next couple days. All right. Before we get to a little North Carolina next head coach talk, can we get more subscribers? We're going live every Tuesday night, breaking down the latest rankings, talking more college football. We'll crank up our college football content as we get closer to the playoff. Might even do some playoff watch parties. So lock us in for that. Recruiting will heat up, transfer portal, potential other head coach openings. So we'll cover all that here at Chat Sports. So hit that subscribe button. Our record this season for a live show is 74 new subscribers. We already got 9 today. Can we get up to 75 plus? That'd be awesome if we could make it happen. All right, stay tuned. We'll get back into our mock rankings, and then we'll react to the committee's rankings as well. But coming up next, Mack Brown out at North Carolina. Who could replace him? We'll talk next. He's Joey Peterson. I'm Harrison Graham. It's the end of an era in Chapel Hill. Mack Brown fired, which is kind of unfortunate, but hey, he wanted that buyout money, baby. North Carolina going to move in a new direction here. He is going to finish out the season, at least the regular season. We'll see about the bowl game, but it is coming to an end at UNC. And on today's show, we're going to look at some potential replacements. But Joey, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the resume and the legacy of Mack Brown for just a few moments. I mean, this guy's 8th all-time in wins with 288, 16 seasons at 2 different Power 4 programs, North Carolina over 2 stints, of course at Texas where he won a national championship. I don't think he'll ever be considered one of the elites of the sport, but I think he's in that second tier. I mean, this is one of the better coaches of my lifetime.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think he'll ever be mentioned in the same breath as like the Bobby Bowdens or the Lou Holtz or all those guys.
Sabins,
yeah. Exactly, the Sabins. But man, what he was able to do and what he's able to do and how he was able to recruit at Texas and what he built that program up to be in the early 2000s really kind of makes you scratch your head why he couldn't take those same efforts with UNC on the recruiting trail. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But show Mack Brown some love on a fantastic career, but making sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you love Mack Brown, if you want to wish him well wishes in his buyout retirement, which I'm sure we all would love right now, go ahead and give us a like on the video.
Enjoy the macchiatos, Mac. All right, Harrison, Joey here. Let's take a look at 10 candidates that could replace him. There's some early reports, some leaks of some names that could make some sense in Chapel Hill, which I think is an interesting job. I don't think it's a top 25 job. It's going to be a basketball school first always, but I think it's a decent job. Charlotte's an area players want to go play, all that stuff. So let's get into it here. A name that emerged today, Joey, Arthur Smith, former, obviously, Falcons head coach, currently the offensive coordinator with the Pittsburgh Steelers, played his college ball at North Carolina. On3 Sports mentioned him as a potential name to follow. Obviously has a pretty strong NFL resume, resurrected a guy like Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee, got the Falcons job. Didn't do great there, but now has Russell Wilson and that Pittsburgh offense playing at a pretty high level. Does he want to coach in college? I don't know, but certainly an interesting name to monitor here.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting name, and honestly, it's one that I kind of didn't even really expect to be mentioned.
I didn't even know he went to North Carolina.
Exactly. That one's coming kind of out of left field for me. But no, when you look at, like you said, what he's been able to do with quarterbacks, and I think that was Mac Brown's kind of nix on his career towards the end of it, as he wasn't able to capitalize on having Drake May, who was, the 4th overall pick in the NFL draft.
Sam Howell.
And Sam Howell as well. His career regression. Both of those two guys from one year to the next looked like almost shells of themselves from the year before. So to get a guy in here, and Arthur Smith, who's great with dealing with quarterbacks, could be a big attraction for UNC.
Charles Huff, the head coach at Marshall, and I think this is going to be a theme for jobs like this. Who are ascending high-level group of 5 head coaches? Huff has a chance to win the Sun Belt play for a Sun Belt championship this week if they're able to win. So keep an eye on him. Alex Golesh is an interesting name here. I've seen a couple of people mention for this job. He's done a pretty good job at South Florida. He's played Alabama tough 2 years in a row. His teams have. Obviously, USF is kind of one of those stepping stone jobs, so I think if he got a Power 4 opportunity, he would be a name to monitor here. His offenses are pretty dynamic, just a classic spread system that he runs down there, so keep an eye on him. Obviously, he's recruited in Florida, which you would like to do if you get the North Carolina job, recruit that East Coast, so could be a possibility there.
Yeah. And the next, we got Garrett Riley, offensive coordinator at Clemson, obviously made the jump from TCU to Clemson. They've seen some offensive production uptick over the last year or so. What are your thoughts on Garrett Riley, the possibility?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a TCU alum. He was the OC when the Frogs went to the national title. I like him. I think he's pretty good. Obviously, he's the younger brother of Lincoln Riley. At times when he's been at Clemson, there's been some situational play calling things I haven't loved, but the more I've watched them, the more I've appreciated what he's been able to do, because I think Cade Klubnik does have some physical limitations. He doesn't have the strongest arm, and he's leaned into him more as a runner. That's opened up that offense more, so I think he's been pretty adaptable with the players he had. He unlocked Max Duggan, a player who in the 3 years prior at TCU was just an average player. Then he becomes a Heisman candidate. So I think he'll be a head coach in the near future. I don't know if this is the job he gets, but he's been at Clemson, knows the area from the last couple of years, you would think, pretty well. So I do think this, Joey. I think if you're North Carolina, youthfulness, that is what you're looking for here. I think he would be a guy that would kind of dive into this program with 2 feet into the deep end, if you will. Let's talk about our sponsor here, then we'll take a look at some more candidates. Shout out to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's show. Available in more than 30 states, 10 million users and counting. The best daily fantasy sports app out there is Prize Picks. Get signed up today at prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS. The way it works is simple. You set lineups of 2 or more players and pick more or less on the stats that are available. If it's football, it could be touchdowns, yards, rushing yards, receiving yards, etc. Basketball, points, rebounds, combo stats, fantasy score, all type of things you can pick from. Choose more or less, and if you win, you win money. It's very, very simple. And also, got a little special for you guys as well. Tyreek Hill, more or less than half a yard, so take advantage of that this Thanksgiving. Pair that with something else. Just do a 2-player entry. You're halfway home to a win right there. And if you're a first-time customer, sign up with our link, prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS. Not only does it help support us, it's going to support you, because when you play for just $5, you're going to get a $50 bonus sent straight into your account. So check it out today, prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS. Okay, Will Stein, who's had a super rapid rise here. Joey, he was the offensive coordinator at Lake Travis High School 5 years ago. Not even the head coach.
Yeah.
And now he's the OC at Oregon, and they obviously got it rolling up there. He's going to be a head coach soon. Geographically, I don't know if that matters as much as it used to with the portal and all that stuff. But I don't know if he has any East Coast ties. He's been in Texas, obviously on the West Coast now. So it'd be interesting if they took this leap here. I think this would be a bit of a leap, but again, young guy, offense, that's where a lot of teams like to go now.
Yeah, well, and also if you look at the coaches that he's coached under the past 2 years, he's with Dan Lanning right now in Oregon, who, like you said earlier, he's getting possible looks at in the NFL. And then he was with Jeff Traylor in UTSA. And if you remember last year, when there were a couple of head coach vacancies, he was a pretty hot name, all right? So he's been under the coaching tree of some guys who have been getting looked at and some guys who are in high opinion and when it comes to college football. So I think that's definitely a name to look at.
Top 5 we go. Dan Mullen, who I think we always put on these lists, and then we don't really know if he wants to coach or not. But I think this would be a pretty good landing spot for him. Like, it's a good job, but it's not a great job, so the pressure's not sky high if you're Dan Mullen and you take this job. The knock on him at the end of his coaching career at Florida was he didn't really like to recruit. Well, it's kind of easier now because with the transfer portal, you just call guys on Zoom. Hey, you want to come here or not? Like, it's not.
We'll give you $1 million.
You don't have to fly across the country anymore to go get kids nearly as much. He's been linked to jobs. He interviewed for Syracuse last year, pulled his name out of that mix. Not sure if he would have gotten the job anyway, but it's not like he's completely ignored options in the last couple of years. But he's like you see the quote there. It would have to be the right opportunity. I think he's pretty comfortable just talking on ESPN a couple days a week. But if he gets that itch again, I think this is the type of job that would be a good fit. Like, he was a much better fit at Mississippi State than a high-profile Florida, right? Like, I think at a Tier 2, Tier 3 job, he can have success.
Yeah, well, and even in Florida, he had a lot of success. I think that's what a lot of people are looking back to when you heard Billy Napier's name in the hot seat rumors, and they looked back and they said, we had all these great seasons with a guy like Dan Mullen, then we pulled the plug, hired Billy Napier, and he's done what he's done. Obviously, they're having a little bit of a resurgence. No, but I think Dan Mullen would be a great fit for him. It'd be like dipping the toe back into the water, right? You're not fully cannonballing in. You're not going to a top 5 program that's top of the SEC or top of the Big Ten. You're going to UNC where, like you said earlier, they're a basketball school. They'll always be a basketball school, okay? Not a lot of pressure within the school, not a lot of pressure within the conference. So, you guys answer this question. Will Dan Mullen return to college football next season? If you think yes, give us a Y, and if you think no, go ahead and give us an N down there in the comment section.
J.B. Chadwell, who has been in the Carolinas forever. He coached, obviously, at Coastal Carolina. He's at Liberty now, knows the area well, did well at both those schools who have little to no history whatsoever. Obviously, he took over for Hugh Freeze at Liberty, who kind of got it going there. But pretty good coach. Is he ready to jump into the Power 4 ranks? He's had opportunities in the past that didn't really materialize. So, interesting name here. Is this the time he makes the jump to a higher level program? We'll have to wait and see. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you love college football. This is the time of year we kind of turn up the heat on our coverage. College football playoff rankings, more playoff teams this year. Might do some live streams during some of these games. So make sure you guys subscribe. We'll have the offseason covered as well with the transfer portal and recruiting. This is the time. And also, if you're an NFL or NBA fan, we cover those sports as well. Okay, I always struggle with the pronunciation. Is it Andy Kotelnicki? Kotelnicki. This guy's awesome. I mean, he was the OC at Kansas that helped just turn that offense into one of the most creative and fun ones in college football. He gets the Penn State job, has obviously done pretty well with that offense this year. It's a matter of if, not when, Joey, that he gets a Power 5 head coaching job. He's one of these quick risers, and maybe this is the right spot for him to kind of jump into the water and get a head coaching gig.
Yeah, and I get that he was under Lance Leipold when he was at Kansas, and Lance has done a phenomenal job with the Jayhawks. But if you're able to turn Kansas into one of the best offenses in college football, I think that's automatic. You should be a head coach at some point in your life.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to say it took him 2 months this year, Kansas, to figure out how to play football again.
Exactly.
They're playing good now, but it was like, this is not the same team despite having the same players.
Yeah, you saw the drop-off from Jalen Daniels from being with Kotelnicki to being without Kotelnicki, and he looked like two different players, okay? And then he's been with Penn State, worked with Drew Aller, Tyler Ward. He's kind of turned into a star as well.
He's awesome,
so we know that he is able to coach the offensive side of the football. Now I think they're just kind of getting ready to see, okay, he's learned a little bit under James Franklin. He's learned a little bit under Lance Leipold as well. Is it time for him to get a head coaching job? I think, like you said, it's not a matter of if it happens, it's when it happens, and it might be pretty soon.
Yeah, and obviously I want to see Penn State in some more high-leverage games here because the one game they played this year against a good opponent, Drew Aller didn't play that well. Is that on Kotelnicki? I've seen Aller in big games before. Kotelnicki didn't play well in those games either. So if they're in the playoff, they'll get some more opportunities against some big-time opponents. All right, Barry Odom, the head coach at UNLV, who's done pretty well there. I mean, they were able to get a lot of transfers. They're in the mix to win the Mountain West and potentially, if crazy stuff happens, steal that group of 6 playoff spot if they're able to win a couple of games here and beat Boise in the Mountain West title game. He's been all over the place, Joey. He was the Mizzou head coach for a few years, had some success, but could never take it to the next level. He was at Arkansas for a couple of years. Now he's the head coach at UNLV and on the cusp of a 10-plus win season. I could see him getting back into the Power 5 game here.
Yeah, I think so too. And like we talked about a little bit with Mullen, I think getting this job at North Carolina is just a perfect way to kind of wade back into that water. You're not recruiting against the Alabamas, against the Georgias, against the Floridas like he had to do against Missouri. No, you're recruiting against good teams like Florida State and Miami and Clemson, but it's still not the same, right? You're at a very low disadvantage when you're at Mizzou and you're the head coach of that program that's at times at the bottom of the SEC.
Yeah.
If you get a chance to take over North Carolina in an ACC conference that seems to be wide open this year with SMU being in there 1 year and now having a chance to go to the playoff, I think that'd be a good time to take a shot on a guy like Barry Odom.
And then you got John Sumrall. This is the name early on here in the first 24 hours of this news dropping that you're seeing the most. The Athletic reported that he will get a, quote, serious look. If you're not familiar with him, he's the head coach at Tulane. Between Troy and Tulane, he's 32-6.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you do that at a Group of 5 level, you're going to get an opportunity at the Power 4 level, and it certainly seems like he could be the next guy to make that jump. And Tulane, if they get a little help from Boise, could also be in the mix to make the college football playoff this year, which would be obviously a huge accomplishment for that program.
Yeah, I think with Sumrall, what it maybe comes down to is I wouldn't be surprised if he almost not waits, but kind of sits for a little bit and sees what other jobs are open. Because like you said, he's a hot name right now. He's a hot name for almost any team in the country that's looking to possibly move on in another direction at head coach. So is UNC the job that Sumrall would want to take, or would he rather wait and see if there's a bigger Power 5 job or Power 4 job that awaits him?
It's always a tough balance because you don't want to miss your window. Like, did Jeff Traylor miss his window?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but we'll see if he makes that jump here. So there you have it, 10 head coaching candidates to potentially replace the legend Mack Brown. We just went through it here on College Football Now. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Before we get out of this episode, who is going to be the next head coach at North Carolina? Predict it for us down in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we will continue to cover college football on a weekly basis. All righty, we get a few shout-outs here, and then let's sprint through our mock rankings here before the College Football Playoff Committee decides to drop their next batch. Now, this in non-surprising fashion, fellas, this basketball game is not going to end by 8 o'clock Eastern time.
College basketball is the worst for timing.
Yeah, well, and if it's even within 15 points in the final 3 minutes, they will play the foul game. They will use every timeout. And, this is an interesting name. Jimbo Fisher.
That is an interesting
That's
name.
Actually pretty interesting.
So
we got to redo the whole video. I'm just kidding.
So how long does he have to sit to collect all that buyout?
Well,
that's the question.
It would be several years. The second he goes back in, it offsets. But he still gets the money. It's just like, say A&M owes him $50 more million. Well, if North Carolina gives him a 5-year, $25 million deal, A&M now owes him 25.
Okay, gotcha.
So he gets the same amount. He just doesn't double dip. So, look, if it were me, why would I coach?
No, exactly.
Now,
especially at his age.
I say that. These guys love it.
Yes.
Most of them. Now, he's a little older. Maybe he's like, I'm just done. But if you're him, if you do want to coach again, you can't just let the 5 years play out because by then you're too far removed.
Exactly.
So I think, if he's going to get back in, it probably needs to either be this year or next year. So
Dylan saying Urban.
It's not happening. Urban's done.
He's cooked.
He's cooked. He's hanging out on Big Noon Kickoff. All right, let's go through our mock playoff rankings here. I won't spend as much time on the lower ones. I think Kansas State gets back in there. UNLV, Tulane, the two other group of 6 teams to monitor, along with Boise State, to potentially make that college football playoff. This next grouping, Joey, I think there are scenarios where they're all still alive, but the path gets tougher. Iowa State and BYU out of this grouping has the best chance to get to the Big 12 title game and win it. Texas A&M, though, they beat Texas. They're in the SEC title game. You win that game, you're in the playoffs. So it's kind of crazy. A&M is either going to be a top 4 seed in the playoff or has no chance of making the playoffs.
Yeah, well, and it's even after that Auburn loss, obviously you don't want to lose that game on the road in Jordan-Hare. But at the end of the day, Mike Elko's looking at his guys and he's saying, guys, we still have destiny in the palm of our hands, right? We control our own destiny, and that's all you can want as a coach. You don't want to play the game and then have to watch another game and root for a different outcome. You want to win the games you have control over, and that is what they have ahead of them. And so we'll see if they'll be able to beat Texas. It'll be at home. That game's going to be absolutely juiced this Saturday night. I cannot wait to watch that one.
So you got A&M with 3 losses. Ole Miss, I've got at 16. That's the interesting thing I'm watching tonight. Where do these 3-loss teams in the SEC stack up? Because Ole Miss at 16. We'll get to a couple other teams here in a second. We mentioned it earlier. A&M doesn't apply as much because if they lose, they're out. If they win, they're in the SEC title game. So it's kind of a different game for them. But Ole Miss, South Carolina, Bama. How is that ordered tonight? Because I think that really matters. And I think it really matters for Bama and Ole Miss because South Carolina has a ranked team that they're playing that if they win that game, they could leapfrog them.
Yes.
Ole Miss and Bama, there's nothing they can really do other than just beat their opponent to, impress the committee at this point. Like, they clearly are going to need some level of help. So if you're the lower of those two teams, you're in major trouble. Like, you need a lot to happen.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, Georgia beats Georgia Tech by 50. Nobody bats an eye. Ole Miss beats Mississippi State by 30 or 50. Nobody really bats an eye. So they can win those games in big margins, but at the end I don't think it's going to do much for the committee.
It just keeps them alive.
Exactly.
Whereas if South Carolina beats Clemson, it's like, they've been playing really well recently. They're trending up. They just beat a top 20 team to finish their resume. Like, that's a needle mover.
Yeah,
like
and beat A&M a few weeks before that.
Yeah, they're like, and to me, I'm a big value the head-to-head outcome, which Bama would have over South Carolina. But you get to this situation where you got all these 3-loss teams. I'm kind of okay saying, who's playing the best right now for the final spot? Like, it's different if it's like, okay, like in the 4-team playoff system, like you obviously have to value head-to-head. But if you're talking about like the 11 or 12 seed, who's playing better right now if South Carolina wins on Saturday? South Carolina or Alabama? I will take South Carolina.
Yeah.
Like, I think they finish stronger. If you watch them play Bama, they probably should have won that game to begin with. So it's going to be interesting to see what the committee does with all of that. I just think when you get to these bubble teams, you're talking about like the 12th team making it. I'm okay with the scenarios kind of getting a little wonky and valuing kind of how you finish in the eye test at the end of the season a little bit more.
Yeah, also that game was a very long time ago. That's a late September game. And at this point in the season, these teams are totally different in early December and late November than they were in late September. So yes, they do have the head-to-head, but I think you got to look at most recent how they've been playing. South Carolina undeniably has been playing better football than Alabama.
Yeah, and again, these are our mock rankings, what we think the committee will do, not necessarily what we would do. SMU at number 10, I think they move up a few spots. I think they jump Boise. Boise skated by 2-8 Wyoming.
Yeah.
I know SMU just played Virginia, but Boise's been reeling a little bit recently. I think SMU jumps them. I got Indiana at 9, Joey. That's where I've got them settling in here, dropping 4 spots. I think you can make the argument as high as probably 7 and as low as maybe 11 or so. I think they'll come in that range. I got them at number 9 here.
Yeah, I think Cignetti and that crew, they didn't do themselves any favor with Ohio State this past weekend, but a lot of people did them favors on the other side of that coin, okay? And so, was that the outcome they wanted to happen? No. But are they in the spot now that they can look back and be like, okay, I'm glad we're here. Sure, we didn't win that game, but our guys got confidence. Our guys got the time, the chance to go on the road, play a really good Ohio State team in Columbus. Like you said, and like we've talked about, they had the 106th ranked schedule, which of course that was beneficial for them because they got a lot of wins, but they also didn't get tested a lot. So they got to kind of see what they're made of, and they can now reassess, relook, see what they need to do going forward.
Tennessee at number 8, your Volunteers. I think it's pretty simple for them. You beat Vandy, you're in.
Yep.
If you don't, probably out, but who knows? I asked you in the office, if you were told before the season you have to win at Vanderbilt the last week to make the playoff, would you take it? You said absolutely.
Yep.
So that's where the Vols sit. This Vandy team is still feisty. They're not quite what they were, say, a month ago, I would say, in terms of how they're playing, but they're going to have to show up and play. Like that. This Vandy team's not just a team you just roll in there and win. So Vols in a good spot. They win on Saturday. Not only are they in, I think they're probably hosting a playoff game in the first round.
Yeah, I would hope so. It definitely wasn't looking like that before this game. But again, with all the losses, things changed up. And, man, I don't know if there's much I would rather see than a home playoff game.
Would you go if that happened, if depending on when and how and all that stuff?
So, funny enough, Baltimore plays that Saturday the 21st. And so
are all the games that Saturday?
3 of them are that Saturday. So most
have,
likely I wouldn't be able to.
You'd have to get some luck.
Yeah. We're praying on that one.
We're knocking on wood here. We're knocking on wood. Georgia at 7. See, in like this case, you clearly value the head-to-head,
yes.
right? Like 2 touchdown win, resumes similar. Georgia's probably slightly better. They got the win in Austin.
Sure.
So I think that's a clear case where you would value the head-to-head. Miami at number 6. The committee has liked Miami more than other people, I would say, if you're going off. I think Miami's a eye test versus resume team. Like, they're clearly aesthetically pleasing. They've got a Heisman quarterback, all this stuff. Don't have a great resume, but I think for Miami, it's you win the next 2 games, you're clearly in the playoff anyway. You win the ACC. The question for me will be is if they get to the ACC title and lose, are they still in?
Yeah.
That'll be the question because once they lost for the first time, I would have said no. But after this past week's chaos, I do think there's a path where one loss Miami or SMU, if they were to lose in the ACC title game, could still earn a spot in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I think it might depend on what the loss looks like. But, man, Miami is one of those teams that if they get in, kind of like you were talking with Colorado, watch out. They got a Heisman quarterback. Xavier Restrepo at wide receiver is something serious. Their front 7 is awesome. And so they're a team, sure, they played a lot of close games against a lot of not very great teams. But if they get in and you catch them on the wrong day, they can play with anybody.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Notre Dame at number 5, just kind of quietly handling business, just strutting along. They win against USC this week. They are a lock to host a playoff game. They can't get a top 4 seed because they're not in a conference, but they will be 5 through 8, and they will host a first-round game. So beat USC, they're in a good spot. Probably still in, even with the loss to USC, but maybe they'd fall out of that hosting range if that were to happen.
Yeah, I don't see them losing to USC. It's going to be interesting what happens to USC in the offseason. You know, Lincoln had the opportunity this last offseason to make a lot of changes at defense, and he did that. And they paid dividends this season. But now you're kind of looking at him, you're saying, you're the offensive guru. You had a Heisman Trophy winner for 2 years in Caleb Williams.
Yep.
What are we doing? We need to figure some things out. So that's something for me to monitor over this offseason.
Producer Sam is the biggest Lincoln Riley fan on the planet. Penn State at number 4. We're going to look at our college football playoff map. I think you could debate, are they already in no matter what? I can't quite get there because they don't have really their only ranked win is Illinois, and they're going to be like 23rd. they lose to Maryland. That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I think they're probably in no matter what because I think they got enough help last weekend. But certainly if they were to win this week, they're obviously a lock at that point. So I don't know what to make of Penn State. I don't view them as a true national title contender. I certainly think they could win a game or two. But is the James Franklin-Drew Aller combination winning 4 games on the trot? That's a tough sell to me. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, well, you look at James Franklin's record in big-time games, which is mainly against Michigan and against Ohio State, and it's pretty atrocious. And every single one of these playoff games is going to be a big-time game. So now this is his chance to prove to people, hey, I can win the big-time games. I don't know if he can. We'll get the chance to see because, like you said, pretty much a lock at this point.
Well, and speaking of locks, I think these 3 teams are all locked in. Oregon, they could lose this week, lose in the Big Ten title game. They are in the playoff. Ohio State, too. They might fire Ryan Day if they lose to Michigan, but I still think they'd be in the playoff with wins over Indiana and Penn State. And then Texas, I think they lose to A&M this week, sitting at home at 10-2, they'd be in the playoffs. So I think they're all locked in. Obviously, for Texas, if they win, they're in the SEC championship game. For Ohio State, if they win this week, they get their rematch with Oregon. So still a lot to play for, but I think those are the only 3 teams you can say with 100% confidence that they are locked into the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, I think this past weekend, I think Indiana and I think Tennessee benefited really heavily from all the chaos. I think the third team that benefited the most was Texas.
Yeah.
Because I think if you look at their resume and their strength of schedule and the fact that they lost at home to Georgia in a fashion that wasn't really a close game for the entirety of it, you ask yourself, if they lose one more and they're a 2-loss team, are they out of it?
There was a real scenario where 6 SEC teams finished 10-2, including Texas, and they would have had the worst resume. But that's over now.
Yes.
So they're kind of in by default at this point. And remember, the bracket doesn't reflect the rankings necessarily because the 4 highest-ranked conference champions, as of now projected conference champions, would be Oregon, Texas, Miami, and Boise State. So they would get the top 4 seeds. A 5th highest-ranked conference champion gets an automatic berth. That would be Arizona State, who we have 15th in the ranking in the rankings. So they would get the 12 seed. So in this case, Joey, who do we have at number 12? Clemson, despite being 12th, would technically be on the outside looking in heading into rivalry week. They'd be the first team out.
Yeah, and I think that's, I don't want to say deserved, but after that opening loss against Georgia, I think everybody, and myself included, was like, okay, maybe Clemson's not that great this year. And then they rattled off a lot of wins in a row, and then it all came crashing down a couple of weeks ago. So if they are out of it, with who you got coming out of the ACC, with SMU, and with Miami possibly, I think I'm comfortable with saying Clemson's probably the 3rd best team in that conference.
I'll say this. If you're Clemson and you beat South Carolina this week, you're in a pretty good position because you may not even have to play in the ACC title game, and that might actually be a benefit.
Yes.
Now, obviously, you'd like to play it and win it and just get the automatic bid, but you could just sit at home, and as long as 1 team or 2 teams lose over the next 2 weeks, you're probably in the playoffs.
They're like the Tennessee of the ACC.
Yeah.
They just got to win the last game, sit, and let the chips fall.
I will say, that was the kiss of death because Lane Kiffin came out and said not playing for the SEC title might be the way to go. And then he lost at Florida. So you may just want to focus on winning, but yeah, that's certainly there's different scenarios with this 12-teamer now that really come into play. Help us out, subscribe. We're trying to set a record for most new subscribers this season on a college football playoff live stream. We're about halfway there. 34 new subs tonight, the most we've picked up. This fall has been 74, so hit that subscribe button. We're here tonight. We'll be here next Tuesday night, and then Sunday, the following Sunday, will be the final show until we find out, or when we find out who are the 12 teams. So we're going to be rocking and rolling here. Okay, we got Duncan with the super chat, and by the way, there's 3 minutes left. Memphis, Michigan State. As soon as that game ends, the committee will start to unveil their rankings, and we will react with all of you. Countdown clock here is a rough estimate. Sam is he's adjusting on the fly here. Yeah, exactly. We're forcing the issue here. Duncan says, UConn just lost 2 straight. Depression kicking in. I need this live like I need air. Thrilled Sooners in Florida played. No, not today. I don't also I also don't see Boise getting a bye or a home game.
Ooh.
They won't get a home game because they won't be in the top 8.
Yeah.
But the bye is very much in play. The question is, will the Big 12 champ close the gap to jumping them in the rankings, which would then get them that 4th and final seed in the round of 16?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the only chance he had with that if it was going to be a one-loss Big 12 champ, but that's kind of
Boise's not doing themselves any favors, though, the way they're playing. So, I wonder if, ASU wins impressively in a Big 12 title game. That would be 10 wins in a row. Boise's kind of stumbled to the finish line. Could that change the pecking order? It wouldn't shock me. I think let's see tonight the gap between Boise and Arizona State. If it's only a couple of spots, I think that's very much still on the table.
Yeah.
I think that very well could happen.
One thing I am interested in, Harrison, is I would love to see an SEC team have to play at a Big Ten team's house in December in the cold.
I mean, you're watching these NFL snow games. You're like, how sick would that be for a college football playoff game?
Exactly.
It'd be incredible. All right, blind resume time. We got 4 teams here to discuss. The 3 categories are strength of schedule, strength of record, ranked wins. So you look at the resumes there, Joey, from left to right. Obviously, on paper, Team 1 has the clear edge, right? The most ranked wins. And this is based on our projected ranking, so there could be a scenario where one of these ranked wins isn't a ranked win, depending on what the committee does. But we feel pretty confident in those assessments there. You guys let us know who you think has the best resume, 1, 2, 3, or 4. We'll go back to blind resume here and kind of discuss this further, 1, 2, 3, or 4 before we reveal. Joey, you look at these 4 teams. 1, obviously on paper, best resume. How would you assess the other 3?
I'd assess the other 3 as Team 3 probably shouldn't have any chance to make it into the playoff if they're a 3-loss team. Okay? I would probably say the same as Team 4. I'd say Team 1 and Team 2, you got to look at those ranked wins or maybe their other wins of the season and see how dominant those were and see if that's something that gets them in.
And that's what I'm fascinated to see what the committee values, especially if these are teams on the bubble, right? Which, little teaser, they are. So if you're right, let's just eliminate 3 and 4. Let's reveal here. You get to Bama and South Carolina. I know a lot of people are like, Bama's done. I've said it as well. I've watched them play, and I'm like, this does not feel like a team that should be in the playoff. But the metrics are what they are. They have 3 ranked wins, including a win over Georgia. They have the better metrics. They beat South Carolina head-to-head. How much weight will that carry versus how are the teams playing right now? Because I think out of those 4, South Carolina's playing the best right now. So going to be very interesting to see how it all ends up playing out.
What's so interesting about Alabama is I don't know if there's a team as dependent on quarterback play that has such a volatile quarterback as Alabama.
A lot of variance. Yeah.
I mean, he is Jekyll and Hyde. I can't say it any better than that. There's games like he has against Wisconsin or that first half against Georgia where he looks like prime Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And there's even games like LSU where he looks like prime Derrick Henry. But then there's times against Oklahoma where he looks like Jameis Winston the season he threw 30 picks.
Yeah.
He has so much volatility, and I think that's what makes him so scary is because they could get in, they could rattle off 4 wins, he could play like Superman, or they could lose to pretty much anybody in the field.
All right, we got 90 seconds left. Before we get to this, Sam, can we show the map, and then we'll come back to this? Memphis up 9 points, minute and a half left. Let's see if old Sparty starts fouling here. But we're bringing back our college football playoff map, and this is our best estimations here. It's tougher to map out with it being a 12-team playoff. I think in the committee's eyes, Joey, there's probably a couple more locks.
Yeah.
But if Penn State loses to Maryland, it's like that's a pretty bad blemish.
Yeah.
If Notre Dame loses to USC, their 2-loss combination's pretty poor when you factor in Northern Illinois. Those 2 teams are probably in,
yes.
But we've got them in the control's destiny, which that category is simple. You win the rest of your games, you're in the playoff. For most of these teams, it's just one more game. Penn State, you beat Maryland, don't have to worry. Notre Dame, beat USC, don't have to worry. Miami, win your last game and then win the ACC championship, you get a top 4 seed. Same with SMU. Same with Boise State in the Mountain West. Indiana, you beat Purdue. I don't think they're going to drop enough tonight where they would fall out of the 12-team bracket.
Yeah, when you look at this map right here, every single one of those teams on the bubble are looking at all those teams ahead of them and above them on that controls destiny, and they're just wanting chaos. And if we know anything in this sport, it's that chaos can strike at any moment. So sure, it all seems like all these teams are locked right now. Okay, right? You got Tennessee, they're playing Vandy. You got teams playing teams that you should beat. Indiana's playing Purdue. But what does college football teach us every single weekend is that it's impossible to predict and that anything can happen.
If you're on the bubble, you do not want Texas A&M to beat Texas because that creates a couple of things. One, if they beat Georgia in the SEC title game, that's obviously they get that spot, and that's not Georgia would get in at 10-3.
Yes,
I feel confident in that. And while I wouldn't predict it, is there a scenario where the committee would put the SEC champion runner-up in, even with 4 losses? I'd be surprised.
Yes,
but
I would be surprised as well.
This is typically an SEC-friendly committee. We've seen that since this system started. So I think just from a simplification standpoint, if you're Clemson, if you're these Big 12 teams, if you're South Carolina, you really want Texas A&M to lose. You want that to happen. You look at the SEC chaos. We don't have Missouri in the picture. Just their resume and how they've looked, they're just kind of a notch below. But those top 7 teams are still alive, Joey. Even Ole Miss if a lot of chaos happens.
Yeah, and I feel pretty confident going back to what you were asking earlier. If Texas A&M beats Texas and then they go on to the SEC championship and they lose in that game, I just don't think this committee can put a 4-loss SEC team in the championship.
I agree with you. I do agree. What if they were to lose like 31-30 though? I don't know, man. I think if your team open up a spot on the bubble, you want Texas to win this game.
Yeah.
That's pretty clear. Look, that's going to be a rocking crowd. It's the most expensive ticket in college football this year, renewing a rivalry for the first time since 2011. And everything's at stake, especially for A&M.
Well, yeah.
Like, if they lose, they're done. If Texas loses, they're not done, but they're going to leave it all out there for this game. So it's going to be rowdy in College Station.
Yeah, and I would not be surprised in the slightest to see A&M win this game. I really wouldn't.
They're going to empty the tank.
They are going to.
They're going to make up plays that we've never seen before to try and win this game. They care more about winning this game than making the playoffs.
Yes.
Believe me on that one. As someone who has lived in Texas his entire life, they would rather win this game and not make the playoff than make the playoff and lose this game. I swear to, at least this year. Maybe not in the future, but this year, I promise you that is true.
This is like their Super Bowl, but imagine if they were waiting for their Super Bowl for 13 years?
Yeah.
And so this game means so much to them. It's on the road. Kyle Field is an incredible atmosphere. I still am not a huge believer in Quinn Ewers. They've got an awesome defensive line, A&M does, with Nick Scourton and all the guys they've got on that side, coached by one of the best defensive coaches in Mike Elko. I mean, there's a really good chance that they win this game. I don't want to say really good chance, but I would not be surprised in the slightest if they upset Texas on Saturday night.
Rivalry games, in most cases, are closer than they should be anyway. This feels like a 50-50 game.
Yes.
I would not be surprised. If I was Texas, I wish A&M would have won last week because, now they are going to ramp it up even more. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. We'll flash this super chat real quick, and then we are going to hear from the committee here in just a few minutes. Red Car Guy Official says Ohio State is the best non-undefeated team resume. No doubt. They have 2 top 10 wins.
Yeah.
Indiana's still probably going to be top 10. Penn State, and their one loss is by 1 point to the number 1 team in the country on the road.
Yeah.
That's the best resume among the non outside of Oregon, who's undefeated.
Yeah, they've also just got dudes at every single position on both sides of the football as well.
Yep.
I think what is going to be the decider for Ohio State or not is how Will Howard plays when they get
Can
into
he
the
win
playoff.
4 games in a row against good competition? That's what I want to know. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Now, it may only have to be 3 in a row because if they win the Big Ten title game, they would get that first-round bye. But we'll see. They got Michigan in the game this week. If you're ready for the latest rankings to drop, and of course, Memphis is farting around here, so we got 35 seconds left. It's a 6-point game. Type go in the chat. The College Football Committee, Playoff Committee, is finalizing their rankings as they sip mimosas out at the what's it called again? The Gaylord Texan, just down the road from us in the greater DFW area. Type go. Joey, you want to throw some shout-outs for us here?
Let's do it. We got Switzo. We got Sniper K. We got Jeff, Ty Man, Mike Smith, Dante, DP, Jeff. We got Clayton, Bama. We got Tyson, James, Ty Man, Will, Dog Pound, Juan. We got Dylan, James, Submachine, Timothy, Ty Man, Mark, D-Mess, James. We got Dylan, Submachine, Anthony, Damon, Jason, Lord Buddy Bear's in here. What's going on, Lord Buddy Bear?
Buddy Bear.
Jeff, James, Glenn, Mike. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. We got Perry, Ariane, James, Perry, Timothy. 1,550 people in the chat. Let's freaking go, man. We got a packed crowd. They're excited for some playoff rankings.
Let's go. Well, they took a timeout. You want to do a little talk about some of these games this weekend? Got some big games coming up.
Yeah, let's
do it. Got a few matchup graphics for you guys. Obviously, we could spend a few more moments on this one. We know what the stakes are. I think this is going to set a record at Kyle Field in terms of attendance. I think they're going to be sneaking people into that stadium. By the way, Ted Cruz is going to be there. I don't know if you're familiar with the Ted Cruz curse,
yeah.
But who does this impact? They're both Texas teams.
I would say it impacts the nation's, or not the nation's, the state's capital.
When he's in the building against a non-Texas team, the non-Texas team almost always wins.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens here. But it's simple. Winner goes to the SEC championship game. It's an elimination game for A&M. I think Texas is safe no matter what for the playoff, but still plenty to play for. Arch rival, chance to win the conference in your first year, all that stuff. So that's a big one. I think this is sneakily the biggest game of the weekend, though. Clemson, South Carolina. And we'll see the rankings tonight. I'm going to call my shot right here, Joey. The winner of this game gets the last at-large bid.
Okay.
I think the winner of this game. Now, Clemson still has a path to the ACC title. If SMU or Miami slips up this weekend, that's on the table. I'm going to say the winner of this game gets into the playoff. And that's, when's the last time this game meant that much, South Carolina and Clemson? It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has. Who do you like in this game?
I think I like South Carolina. It's at Clemson, though, so that's kind of an equalizer. They're actually a slight favorite. South Carolina's more battle-tested. They've played better against better competition. Clemson, laid an egg week 1, obviously, randomly got rolled by Louisville a few weeks back. I think South Carolina has a slightly better team. I would lean the Gamecocks, but it wouldn't shock me if Clemson won. Dabo's coached in a million of these games. So I would lean South Carolina, though.
Georgia Tech in Athens. Curious to see how Georgia Tech's going to do. I don't have much confidence in them pulling off the upset. I just think Georgia's got too many horses in the stable compared to a team like Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I do think Georgia Tech is as good as they've been in a while. Brent Pry, is that his name, their coach?
Yes.
He's done a pretty good job there. They're playing 2 quarterbacks now. They've switched to a freshman, Philo, but Haynes King still plays and runs around. I think this game will be feisty for maybe a half, but I just can't see Kirby laying an egg in this spot. Like you can't lose this game if you're Georgia. So I like the Dogs. What's that, Sam? Yeah, common opponents with Notre Dame and Miami. So that's notable because Notre Dame and Miami both beat Georgia Tech. So if Georgia were to lose and still was hoping to get in with 3 losses, well, that doesn't help their cause. So I like Kirby in that spot. I just getting them at home too. I'd be surprised if they lost that game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be death by 1,000 paper cuts for Georgia Tech, and then they'll break it open sometime in the second half.
All right, here we go. The College Football Playoff Committee is about to reveal their rankings. We'll react with all of you. Stay tuned. Harrison Graham, Joey Peterson live here on Chat Sports. It is college football now. The College Football Playoff Committee is set to unveil their rankings in just a moment. This is the second to last rankings. You got this week, next Tuesday, and then the following Sunday, 5 days later after Championship Saturday, when we will find out who is in the initial 12-team college football playoff. Joey, let's take a look at the college football playoff map that we have put together. Admittedly, there's probably a couple teams misplaced here, but this is our best estimate before seeing the rankings tonight. I think you can only say with 100% certainty that the Oregon Ducks, Ohio State Buckeyes, and Texas Longhorns are in the playoff no matter what happens the rest of the way. Penn State and Notre Dame can probably get in if they lose this week as well, but Maryland, USC, not exactly world beater opponents, so we've got them in the controls destiny category, which is simple. You win and you win the rest of your games you're in. For a lot of those teams, just one game. Tennessee, for example, Georgia, and then on the bubble. So at controls destiny bubble, those 2 categories are the ones to watch, Joey, because that's where things can change.
Yeah, and the bubble, what they're all looking at right now is they're just hoping that this Saturday replicates exactly what happened last Saturday. Because if it does, then things are going to shift a whole lot, and we'll see a lot of those teams on the bubble make their way up into the playoff rankings. But that's the question, is will this Saturday be as chaotic as last one? Obviously not as great opponents for some of these guys like Tennessee and like a Georgia, but we'll see.
Hit that subscribe button. We're going to hear from the committee in just a few moments. We're here every single Tuesday night reacting to the rankings. We'll be back next week as well. Then that following Sunday to react to the first 12-team bracket. We're going to have some watch parties, I would imagine, during the college football playoff. Need more subs. Help us out. All right, we got Dylan with the Super Chat. Can Georgia Tech play spoiler again? I mean, they can. You beat Georgia, very good chance you knock them out. So certainly a possibility. Would I bet on it? No, but I do think this is also the best Georgia Tech team, and I don't know, since they were running the triple option with Paul Johnson, it's been a while.
Yeah, they also are really good at running the football, and I think obviously it's a Kirby Smart coach defense, but if you run it long enough against this Georgia team, like Tennessee was able to see some success late when they just kept running the football, just kept pounding the rock. That's the thing that Georgia Tech does well, and if they're going to win this game, that's something they'll have to do well on Saturday.
Just to explain the new 12-team playoff, the 4 highest-ranked conference champions earn the top 4 seeds in first-round byes. Also, a 5th highest-ranked conference champion is a lock to make the 12-team playoff, and a group of 6 team will get a spot right now. That would be Boise State. So that is that. And so just to explain that, just because you're number 8 in the rankings doesn't mean you'll be the number 8 seed. Because, for example, right now, Miami's not going to be ranked top 4 tonight, but they will have a top 4 seed based on being the projected ACC champion. So just so everyone is clear on how that works. Shout out your favorite team. Let us know who you're representing. We're going to get some shout outs in as we await to hear from the College Football Playoff Committee here. Just a few moments. They're finishing up those mimosas. We got Terrence, who's rocking with the Vols there. And, they heard me. The mimosas are down. Man, what a collapse for Colorado.
Yeah.
I did not see them dropping 9 spots to number 25. Kansas State does re-enter the rankings. They are 24th. That is a head-to-head scenario, though, Joey. Kansas State beat Colorado head-to-head, so that could be notable when we talk about those SEC teams here in a little bit. So Colorado 25, Kansas State 24. Illinois jumps up to 23, an 8-3 Big Ten win as well. So that is where things sit for the first few teams here. UNLV at number 22. We'll get these on screen just as soon as we can, as we're having some tech issues. Here we go. And number 21 is the Missouri Tigers, who I don't think have a chance. Eli Drinkwitz would disagree, but That is 21 through 25. Texas A&M all the way down to 20. So not that it really matters.
Yeah.
They got to win their last 2 games anyway. So the Aggies sit at number 20. Again, the scenario for them, if they beat Texas, they're in the SEC championship game. And then if they win that, they would obviously earn a spot in the college football playoffs.
And this is where to lock in. These next 5 or 6 spots, these are important, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, BYU, they are still in the top 20. Still alive in the Big 12. I still think the path is there. If they can get to the Big 12 championship game and win it, I think they would get into the college football playoff. So they are at number 19. Lost 2 in a row. Iowa State also in the Big 12. They jump up to number 18, also at 9-2, also very much alive in the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's alive in the Big 12. It's crazy. It's America's college football conference, and they're showing why this first year of the playoffs.
This committee really likes Tulane.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why, but Tulane at 17, I wonder if they're close enough to Boise. If Boise slips, I think Tulane jumps them. I think they're going to get that spot over UNLV, for example. And then Arizona State gets up to 16. I projected them 15, so right in that range, they are the highest-ranked Big 12 team. So you got 3 Big 12 teams right there, Joey, 16 through 19. South Carolina jumps up to number 15, so they're the first of kind of this tiering of 3-loss SEC teams as we get to it. Still, Ole Miss is ahead of them. That feels at least somewhat notable.
Yes.
And Alabama to come as well.
Yeah, now we got to wait to see where those two lie with each other.
Yeah,
is
that's
Alabama
the key.
better, or is it Alabama higher, or is Ole Miss higher?
If you're the lower of those 2 teams, you're in major trouble.
Yes, you are in
Major
major trouble. Then you're cheering for Auburn in that case.
And it's Ole Miss who is the lower of the 2. They dropped to number 14. I would imagine Bama is sitting here at number 13.
And Ole Miss, they're buying their tickets to Jordan-Hare on Saturday. They're going to cheer for Auburn all night long. War damn Eagle.
Yeah, let's get the stomach bug going for the. Let's pull some fire alarms the night before the game. All right, Ole Miss at 14, South Carolina 15. I think you're feeling pretty good if you're South Carolina because if you beat Clemson, I think you're jumping Ole Miss.
I agree.
With the ranked opponent. Alabama at number 13, Joey. So the Crimson Tide, everyone says they're done. They stink. I don't necessarily disagree. They're right there, man.
Yeah.
They are still right there. If they get just a little bit of help, they could slither their way into the college football playoff once again.
Well, it's crazy. It just seems like every time they lose, everybody, myself included, is very quickly to say they're toast. After Vandy, they're toast.
Not even wrongfully so.
Exactly.
And here they are. Here they are. The question for me will be, does South Carolina beating Clemson, is that enough to jump Alabama?
Because they push over the head-to-head.
To value over the head-to-head. That is what I want to know. Because Clemson is number 12. Again, that South Carolina-Clemson game, Joey, is massive. I think that could be a win-and-get-in situation. And if you're Clemson, you win that game, I think you're getting in that large spot. I don't think you even have to get to the ACC title game and win it.
Yeah, I think it too. It might depend on what that Auburn-Alabama game looks like, what the Iron Bowl looks like. If it's close, Clemson, you get a win there. I think you jump them. But if Alabama just comes out and rolls Auburn, that's going to be interesting to see how they figure that out.
I just don't see how you could jump Bama over Clemson, given on who they play this week. Clemson's got a ranked opponent. Bama's got Auburn. I don't think Bama can jump Clemson. The question is, can South Carolina jump Bama?
That's the question.
That's the question I have. That is the question I have. So that is 25 through 12. Boise State just kind of plugging away here, Joey. They're at number 11. And being ahead of the Big 12 teams, they will once again be the number 4 seed in this week's playoff bracket.
Yeah, it's a shame we're not seeing we're not going to see them in a home game. Getting to see a playoff game on the Smurf
That
turf.
would be incredible.
That would have been absolutely electric. But man, everybody knows who they've got on that team. Ashton Jeanty, Heisman favorite or Heisman candidate, I should say. It'll be interesting to see how they fare when they play really good competition. They did really well against Oregon early in the season, but again, that was 3 months ago. Different team now.
They will likely play a pretty good UNLV team in 2 weeks in the Mountain West Championship game. That was a close game first time around.
Is that in Las Vegas?
I think it is.
Which would be a home game, literally.
Yeah, I'll have to double check that. Indiana at number 10. We had them at 9, but I think if you're Indiana, you're feeling fine. You beat Purdue this week, you're in. Now, you may not get a home playoff game now, but I think all things considered, the Hoosiers are in a pretty good spot here. SMU at number 9, so they jump a lot here, and that gets back to the ACC discussion, Joey. If they win this week and lose in the ACC title game, as long as they're competitive, I still think they got a pretty good shot at getting in.
Yeah, well, I think just what Rhett Lashley has done with this SMU team, with all the changes they've had at quarterback coming into the season, with Preston Stone and just the switches and how he's done leading them in the ACC, man, he might be coach of the year.
Kevin Jennings, maybe the most underrated player in college football, their quarterback that they switched to permanently early on in the season. The Tennessee Volunteers at number 8, Joey's crew in a good position. They play at Vandy this week. You win that game, I think you're getting a home playoff game. You lose, you're sweating your ass off on Selection Sunday.
If they lose, I mean,
I think if you're one of these teams, I'll let me just say my piece, and then you say if you're a 3-loss team and you bitch about not getting in, that's a you problem.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean you won't get in. It just means you can't complain.
You lost a quarter of your games. You don't need to be mad when you don't get in the playoffs.
Exactly. Georgia at number 7, again, head-to-head coming into play there, Joey, as the Bulldogs ahead of Tennessee. They play Georgia Tech this weekend at home. So there you have it, 7 through 10, Georgia, Tennessee, SMU, Indiana. You're with me, right? Indiana, they win, they're in. I don't think there's any scenario Bama beating Auburn isn't getting them ahead of Indiana.
No, it won't. Indiana's your win, you win. What I'm really interested to see is how Georgia does in this playoff system with how volatile their offense has been. You know, Carson Beck looked fantastic against Tennessee, but he's looked really bad in other games this year.
The Miami Hurricanes at number 6, the highest-ranked ACC team led by Heisman quarterback Cam Ward, Xavier Restrepo, Damian Martinez, maybe the best trio, quarterback, wide receiver, running back in the country. I'm forgetting who they even play this week.
Syracuse.
The Cane at Syracuse too. That's not a layup.
Yeah.
Kyle McCord leads the country in passing yards, so that's not a gimme. They need to go win that game. And again, like SMU, if they win this week, even if they lose in the ACC title game, I think they're probably still at least in a decent position to make the playoff. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish at number 5. Are they at USC or is it at home this week?
I believe they're at USC.
They're at USC. Unless they just got embarrassed, I think they're pretty safe to make the playoff. If they win this week, they would clinch a home game in the first round, which obviously is valuable to have.
What's so interesting is how many of these teams kind of have question marks at that quarterback position, right? You have a question mark on Riley Leonard. Can he win it with the arm? You got a question mark with Jalen Milroe. Can he win? You got a question mark with Drew Aller. A lot of these teams, man.
Speaking of Aller, Penn State, number 4. At 10-1, the Texas Longhorns at number 3, which means Ohio State will be 2 and Oregon will be 1. So there you have it. No changes in the top 4. Excuse me, Jesus. Notre Dame hops up a spot. Miami hops up, and there you go. Let's look at the bracket now momentarily because, again, it's not just 1 through 12. The 4 highest-ranked conference champions, which means Oregon will be the number 1 seed, Texas will be the number 2 seed, Miami will be the number 3 seed, Boise State will be the number 4 seed, and we'll see how it plays out after that. Ohio State will obviously be the 5, being the number 2 team in the country, so they would face Arizona State, who would be the 12 seed in that scenario. We'll get this filled in and make sure it's correct for accuracy standpoints. Ohio State, Arizona State would be the 5-12 matchup, feeding in to play Boise. I mean, if you're Arizona State, you couldn't ask for a better opportunity. I mean, Ohio State's going to be tough, but if you win that, you're probably in the semis.
Exactly, exactly. You got a real opportunity to be in the semifinals.
And if you're Ohio State, it's it sucks if you don't get a bye, but okay.
Yeah.
Arizona State and then Boise, I mean.
Well, also, I think if you're Indiana, you're kind of thinking the same thing as well. Penn State, they don't have a great resume. You got a chance to go out and beat a Big Ten opponent, and then you got a chance to play Miami as well. And a home field, that's not really a home field advantage. I guess at that point, it would be neutral sites.
How about some other matchups here, Joey? Tennessee at Georgia. I know you would hate that.
I would hate it.
If that played out. Josh Heupel has not fared well against Kirby Smart, and it would be on the road feeding into Oregon. That's kind of tough for both teams. Like, tough first game, then you're Oregon in the semis. Penn State at Indiana. I do wonder if it played out like this, Joey. Would they fudge the rankings a little bit? Their bylaws say they're not supposed to, but like you'd have a Big Ten and an SEC game in there. Would you just flip Indiana and Tennessee, for example, and just mix up the matchups? I do wonder if they would consider doing that. And then, of course, you have Notre Dame and SMU in that 7-10 matchup.
Which of these 4 games in this first round interests you the most?
I think which games would be the best? I think SMU Notre Dame would be the best game out of these. I don't like Tennessee's matchup with Georgia. I think we've seen that play out. Arizona State's a fun story. I don't think they have the athletes to play with Ohio State. And Penn State, Indiana, I actually think could be a good game.
I do too.
I don't know how entertaining it would be. Hopefully it'd be a bad weather game. That'd be fun to watch. But I think SMU Notre Dame would be the most intriguing game there because I think SMU could win that game. Like I don't think that's an impossible task there. So that would be the most intriguing game. You guys let us know which game would be the most intriguing in those first-round matchups. Also, grade the rankings this week, A, B, C, D, or F. I don't think I have any major qualms, issues. I thought ASU might be a spot or two higher, but it doesn't really matter. As long as they get to the Big 12 title game and win it, they're going to be in the playoffs. So, I feel fine with it.
Yeah, I think, and again, there's just nothing you can do about it. I think I've just got a little bit of an issue with Penn State being as high as they are.
Yeah.
Man, they played a lot of really close games to not very good teams, haven't beaten a lot of very good teams, but I think they're just, over anybody, they're just benefiting from all the chaos in the SEC.
Yeah, the thing I don't like is they were ranking them high even before all the chaos. So there's something about Penn State the committee likes. I don't really know what it is. I mean, I'm not saying they're a bad team. They're obviously good, but in their one real matchup this year, they weren't crazy competitive. Like Ohio State, I don't care what the final score says, they handled them. So, I to your point though, like this has kind of been one of those years where it's like just win. It doesn't really matter how.
Yeah,
that's the key. So here's another look at the bracket for you guys as well. Yes. SMU Texas, that could be fun. Little all Texas rematch. Yeah, let's get the Pony Access boys in the building for that one. This will be interesting to see how this plays out. And again, let's look back at that map we've got, Sam, because I think it's still relevant here. Even if you're A&M all the way down at 20. You control your destiny.
Yes.
You beat Texas. You beat Georgia. Unless Georgia – well, yeah, actually, no, Georgia's – they're locked in, right? They're the other SEC – yeah, cause they are because they play Georgia Tech. So if you win those 2 games, you're in the playoff. I think Clemson's a pretty big winner tonight at number 12 with a ranked opponent still on the schedule. You win that game, I mean – unless everything is chalk in front of you, you're going to make the playoff.
Yeah, 100%. And depending on how you win that game and if some of the things happen above them, is there a chance Clemson even gets a chance to get a home playoff game?
Maybe. I feel like they would need Indiana or SMU to lose one of their final games, which could happen.
Yeah.
I doubt Indiana loses to Purdue. They're terrible, but it's still a high-pressure game if you're Indiana. I don't care who you're playing again. You've never been in this spot if you're the Indiana Hoosiers. Like, I don't care if you're playing Ohio State or Purdue. You better show up and play. Otherwise, you can get beat. So, I think it's possible that could play out. I think your boys are in a good spot. I think if you beat Vandy, you'll end up getting – I think you'll get into the top 8. I think you'll get a home playoff game.
You think so?
Yeah, I do, because I think that I don't know, actually.
I just don't see much room for movement.
Yeah.
You're not jumping Georgia, obviously.
Well, here's my question. Could they leapfrog Ohio State if Ohio State lost again in the Big Ten title game? Probably not. Probably not.
I wouldn't think so either with the amount of top 10 and even top 5 wins they have with the Indiana game.
They could. I think the best path would be Notre Dame losing to USC. That that feels like the most realistic. So, yeah, maybe they're stuck at the 9 spot, even if they win. I think if you're Tennessee in that case, you just don't want it to be Georgia.
Exactly.
Like,
and I wouldn't mind a road game. I would just hate a road game in Athens.
Yeah, that's not the matchup you want. Like, call me crazy. You'd probably rather play Ohio State, right? Because, like, you've seen this with Georgia. It's not gone well.
We're the little brother. We've seen that film before. Yeah, you probably.
I'm not even calling it a big bro. Like, it's just a matchup thing. Heupel's offense, for whatever reason, against Georgia has not had success. But the beauty of the 12-team playoff is you might just avoid those matchups.
Yeah.
Like, just someone else knock Georgia out, which clearly they can. They've lost twice this year. So, going to be very interesting. I'm most interested this week to see who gets into that Big 12 title game and to see what happens there. That's very fascinating because 9 teams are technically alive to make the Big 12 championship. I'm a little surprised Colorado plummeted that much.
Yeah, that's a big drop for Colorado.
I think that this is where I do question the committee sometimes. Like, are they valuing how Kansas is playing right now? Because a loss to Kansas this past week is not the same if you lost to them 2 months ago.
It's not.
It's not the same.
2 very different teams.
So there you have it. The college football playoff rankings and bracket with 2 weeks to go. Rivalry week this week. Then you got Championship Saturday. And then we're going to find out which 12 teams are in. Any final thoughts, Joey, before we get out of here?
No, man. I mean, everything kind of ended up – we kind of expected everything to end up how it was.
At least in the ballpark.
Even through all the chaos up this past weekend, we were able to determine what we most likely thought the committee was going to do. Now what's going to be interesting is how they're going to handle the Clemson, South Carolina situation.
That's the game to watch this
That
week,
is the game to watch for. And, hey, we'll be back next Tuesday to break that one down.
We'll be back. He's Joey Peterson. I'm Harrison Graham. Appreciate Sam Brown for producing. Shout out to all of you guys for tuning in. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Food, football, doesn't get much better. Family as well. See you guys next time here at Chat Sports.